Hey, back with another video. So I tried to get one out a little faster this time. So I'm not going to wait until the end of every month or the beginning of a new month. I'm just going to try to do this like once a week at least and get them out a little faster. Maybe the videos won't be so long. But everyone has been super cool in the comments, and I have 30 subscribers now, so it's pretty cool. So thank you guys. I read some really cool stuff, starting with The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. If you watched the last video where I talked about how I bought all the Malazan books before I even read any of them, yeah, I did the same exact thing with Joe Abercrombie. You could see right here, I bought all of his books before I even read one, just because I knew I would love it. It comes so highly praised, and yes, absolutely loved it. This is definitely my favorite thing that I have read this year so far. Without a doubt. I can't think of anything else I liked as much as this. I could not put it down. This thing is so good. So, if you've never read, it's kind of like Game of Thrones. It gave me a lot of Game of Thrones vibes, kind of like realistic fantasy in a way. There's a lot of fantastical things like magic and stuff, but it feels very real, like it's in our world for most of it. So you've got Logen, Nine Fingers. There's a scene toward the end of the book with Logen, one of our point of view characters. It's kind of like a plot twist in a way, involving his name, the Bloody Nine, because he's only got 9 fingers. And it was one of the coolest moments in the whole book. So cool. There was several points in reading that I just knew this is a 5-star book. I'm like, this is the first book. How good is this series going to be? I can't wait to keep going. I already started reading the second book. So you've got Glokta, a crippled former man who was tortured, and now he tortures men and interrogates them for the government, basically. And his character is so interesting. And I'd heard a lot about how he's one of the coolest characters. What makes his character so interesting is you get a lot of inner thoughts from Glokta. You don't get like where they're just kind of telling you what he's thinking. You get his actual thoughts. So he'll be talking to someone, and then you'll hear what he really thinks. It's just so cool. He's such a cool character. Joe Abercrombie is such a good writer. All the characters are so good. So you've got Giselle Luthar, kind of a pompous rich boy who his story in the book just involves a lot of him being in love with a girl he shouldn't be, and maybe fighting fights that he shouldn't. He's not really as good as everyone thinks he is. So probably my least favorite character of the 4 or 5 in the book, but still really good. He's got a lot of competition. Some of the characters are absolutely insane. But I wonder what's going to happen with him going forward. I'm really curious. So you've got Colum West. So he's kind of the exact opposite of Luthar. Luthar's rich, kind of a jerk, never really had to struggle. Everything's been handed to him. He comes from a rich family. Whereas Colum is the opposite. He was poor, lower class, who worked his way up to be somewhat high ranking, and everyone respects him for working up that way. Man, there is a scene with him. I think this is also maybe toward the end of the book, maybe like the middle of the book. So he is kind of like a good character in this world full of pretty crappy people. You know, no one's like really good necessarily, but there's a moment where he is with his sister, who's kind of just, he feels like she's just trying to like ruin their life, you know. She's just drinking and kind of like maybe sleeping around, in his opinion. And he's been this character you've been following, and he's pretty much a good guy. He's done some things that you would say that's what a good man would do. But then he loses his temper on his sister, and he smacks her, grabs her by the throat, pushes her against the wall, choking her, and his rage just takes over. And in that moment, you're like, dude, oh my God, you like this guy the whole time, and now you hate him. So he lets go, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. She said, you know, that's what Father would always say after he was done hitting me. He would just tell me how sorry he was. And that hit me really hard. You kind of don't like his sister throughout the book because she's kind of a brat, you know, interesting character, but just not very likable. But then you feel for her, so it's like you get them to where you liked him, and then you kind of hate him, and then you don't really like her, and then you empathize with her. That's good writing, man. That is what makes books so powerful, is just getting into people's heads and just knowing nothing's black and white. Everything is kind of gray, and so good. I could keep going. I could keep talking about this book for the whole time. I'll try not to. You've got Baez, the first of the Magi. So probably the third other moment that really stands out to me is just a moment also toward the end of the book where he uses his magic. So I won't spoil anything. I don't think I've spoiled anything really, but if you've read it, you'll know what I'm talking about, where he uses his magic in a big way. He's used it a few times in the book, and it's so interesting because he's just kind of an old fuddy-duddy in a way, but he's also a super powerful mage, a badass. And you're just wondering, like, who is he really? What is he going to do next? I can't wait to see where the story goes. So I thought it was really cool. So it's called The Blade Itself. And whenever I open the book, so right here at the beginning, it has a quote. The blade itself incites to deeds of violence. And that is a quote from Homer. So I feel like all of the books are going to be like that. They're probably a quote. Before they are hanged, last argument of kings. So, man, I'm just so excited to read the rest of the series. And yeah, let me move on before I just sit here and talk about this book the whole time. The whole point is I'm trying not to make these videos so long, right? Next, I got a big, beefy omnibus from DC Comics. But is it really from DC? It is Vertigo, really. But yes, DC Comics, it's Preacher. So I actually had read the first like 10 or 15 issues of Preacher in the past and always wanted to continue with the series. They reprinted these maybe a couple years ago. I don't really remember. So I jumped on it, bought these huge, beautiful $125 omnibus. It has the first 33 issues and then some spin-offs like from the Saint of Killers and stuff. So if you've never read Preacher, it's extremely blasphemous. So if you're sensitive to that kind of stuff, maybe click off the video because I'll talk about it a little bit. That kind of thing doesn't bother me at all. I'm really fascinated by religion, but I'm not religious at all. So that kind of stuff doesn't bother me. Look at the art. The covers in this are incredible. The art is Steve Dillon. It's written by Garth Ennis. He's done The Punisher. He's done a lot of stuff that I've read. So this was so good. So you've got Jesse Custer, the preacher. He's kind of a rough, badass dude who becomes a preacher, but he's not what you would think as a preacher. He drinks, he cusses, he fights. So he's kind of down on his luck. He's given a sermon at his church, and all of a sudden something comes from the heavens into him. And when it enters, it explodes and kills everybody around him. And what it is called Genesis. It is a thing. I'm trying not to spoil too much. It is an entity that gives him the ability to command. It gives him the voice of God. So anything he says, you have to do it. If he says, get on your knees, you have to get on your knees. It's like kind of like the Purple Man from Marvel Comics. He can basically just tell you what to do and you have to do it. So it's so interesting. What's even more interesting though, he barely does it at all in this whole book. He uses the voice maybe like 2 or 3 times in this entire book. They even mention it at one point, like, how come you didn't just use the voice? And he's like, I feel like I shouldn't use it more than I need to. So he's a super honorable, noble man, but you know, he's kind of a flawed guy, but he's got a high moral standing. He's got a high sense of duty, and he has the voice of John Wayne that talks to him. So you'll just see John Wayne in the shadows giving him advice. This is such a weird book. Garth Ennis has such a cool, creative imagination. I'm getting a workout just holding this thing up the whole time. I love these huge omnibus. Just having the whole story in one. Their second volume is right here behind me. I don't think it's in frame, but yeah, so it's just as big as the first one. So this is only half of the story. So you've got Jesse, you've got his companions Tulip and Cassidy. Cassidy is a vampire. It's like, what? He's just a vampire. Just randomly, there's just a vampire that hangs out with them. It's super weird. They have a really interesting relationship, the three of them, that I did not see coming, really. It was surprising to me. You've got the Saint of Killers is kind of the first antagonist. He is basically the Grim Reaper. So there's a part in the story where they pull the Saint of Killers out to find Jesse so they can get back his power, his voice of God, Genesis. And it kind of goes into his backstory. I don't want to spoil too much, but he's basically just the baddest of all badasses of all time. He is a mean motherfucker, and his bullets don't miss. And he's hunting Jesse, and it's just so cool. There's so many scenes that are just so cool. You've got Herr Starr, who becomes kind of the second antagonist in the book. A German military man who has a penchant for taking it in the back door against his will. Very weird. Such a weird book. So many weird stuff. Incredibly mature, vulgar, toilet humor, a lot of it really, but a lot of it is so funny. It's really funny. You've got the descendant of Jesus in the book. So there's a secret organization that's trying to catch Jesse Custer, and they have the heir of Jesus. So it is the direct blood of Jesus that's been passed down for generation upon generation, and they kept the blood pure, so he's inbred. He's inbred Jesus. He's basically a huge inbred, not huge. He throws shit at people and just says his name like he's a Pokemon. It's so funny. This extremely blasphemous, so sorry if that offends you, but it is hilarious. And yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend this to like your grandma. So I won't talk too much. This video is already going on for quite a while. I got one more book. I actually don't have a copy. I did the audiobook, so I'll throw it up on the screen right here. The last book I read was Blind Sight by Peter Watts. So it is one of the weirdest books I've ever read. It was my sci-fi book for the month. It was so weird. It was pretty dense, pretty hard to understand. It's kind of like futuristic humans. What is a human? What is self-conscience? What is life? What are we? What are we doing? What are we going to become? It's so weird. It's kind of like a First Contact story where they go into space on a mission and then get a signal and then go follow, kind of like Aliens, the movie. And then when they go explore it, there's actual alien creatures. The crew is like androids and humans, and there's a vampire, and there's a woman who is actually like 4 or 5 people inside of one body. It's so weird. This would be one that probably didn't benefit me reading it as an audiobook, because I probably should have slowed down and tried to wrap my head around some of it more, because there was times where I was just like, what is even going on? This is so weird. So I might try to find a physical copy and do it again. I think it's like a series of books, maybe 2, maybe 3 books. but I did enjoy it. There's some big ideas going on, and I like that. I like to be challenged. But I think after reading The Blade itself, it's going to be hard for anything to hit that sort of high because that book doesn't really challenge you. It's not a hard read. It's easy to read, and it's like crack, man. It's so addictive. I couldn't put that book down. So it's hard for anything else to compete against it. I'll stop there. This video is at like 15 minutes. Thank you, everybody that's commented and liked the videos and stuff. So cool. Appreciate you all. See y'all on the next one.